Hello, my name is Corey. In this video, I'm going to be going over the changes that are coming next week to Retail WoW, specifically for healers. This blue post just went out tonight, and it's going to be going live on March 25th, and they might change them on the Monday upcoming. I'm thinking there's definitely a couple of them that after they see the community feedback, they're definitely going to be changing. But I'm going to be reacting to the ones that are going live as of right now. Starting off with Preservation, which is the healer that I most recently have the most experience playing, as that's what I was playing last year, and I'm kind of playing a little bit this year on Mugsy and stuff. So they had to nerf our old 4 set because it was way better than our current tier set. It wasn't so good that Preservation Evokers, for the most part, were choosing to lose the eye level to wear it, just because choosing to lose the eye level is kind of a death sentence in a lot of these fights, just because you're going to be on the floor so much and you're going to lose so much mastery value when your health is so low that, like, especially for Preservation Evoker, your old 4 set has to be really good in order for you to do that. However, some were still doing it, and you definitely didn't want to equip the new one until you had it at really high eye level. And this was like a common problem, not just for Preservation Evokers, but also Devastation Evokers, which is why they also got a bunch of changes. So just a theme in general for Evokers. So they're nerfing that old 4 set, so you don't really have a good reason to wear it anymore. On top of that, they are doing a flat 5% increase for healing, and then they're increasing our Spirit Bloom healing by 20%. If we want to look at like the healing statistics as of right now for healers, so Preservation Evokers aren't at the bottom. Like Holy Paladin and Holy Priest are having a bit of a harder time, but they're definitely not at the top. Um, the biggest kind of like gap they have is the damage that, like, when we look at healers, their damage is so low if you look at it here compared to like a Mistweaver. Like a Mistweaver is literally like almost like 5 evokers, like, which is actually like insane. Like one Mistweaver equals 5 evokers damage. Uh, so that's pretty bad, and they're also bringing like the physical debuff if you need that. So the biggest thing they struggle with is like, yeah, their healing isn't quite up to snuff, and also they don't have any damage. So these next few changes are aimed at their damage. So the Energizing Flame, giving back some mana. Preservation Evoker usually doesn't struggle with mana, but one of their new builds did kind of have them struggling with mana. And then the Disintegrate damage and the Living Flame damage honestly does like nothing, because you're not pressing Disintegrate and Raid, and Living Flame damage isn't going to do a lot. Like they need to buff like our Fire Breath damage for the most part. So these are okay changes for Preservation Evoker. I think it's to get like a tiny bit more viable, but it's definitely not going to have a big impact in my opinion. Moving on to Monk. So Mistweaver and that graph I just showed you, this one, the damage done one, they're absolutely gapping everyone. They're not gapping Disc Priest and Holy Priest as much as it looks like, because like they're bringing PI, of course, but they're gapping absolutely everyone else. So they're going to nerf their damage by 25%. However, they are not losing any of their throughput. They're just making up for it with other buffs. So they're getting a 25% damage nerf, which honestly still puts them like easily at the top ahead of everyone else. So it doesn't do anything to the meta. And then they're not nerfing their healing at all. So again, it's doing nothing to the meta. Mistweavers are completely fine. They're just not gapping as hard as they used to. Holy Paladin has been in a pretty rough spot. Looking at this, they're all the way at the bottom and they're doing barely anything, and it's been a little bit rough. Their damage is not as bad as some of the others, but they're getting some well-needed healing buffs, only like a 3% flat buff, and then they're basically buffing their spenders. I think overall, like, they're guesstimating between like a 7 to maybe 9% buff from all of these changes. So Word of Glory, because they're now playing the Lightbringer tree, so you take the Eternal Flame, that's what Word of Glory turns into, is increased by 20%, Light of Dawn healing by 20%. The Holy Prism buffs aren't really super meaningful. I mean, 50% is quite a bit, but that spell wasn't doing very much to begin with. And then a little bit of a damage buff with the Shield of the Righteous damage. So, helps them a little bit, but isn't going to do much, honestly, at the end of the day, I don't think. Holy Priest, they're getting some small, like, buffs in certain places. Prayer of Healing being increased by 25%. This spell is still not worth pressing or taking, so this is a meaningless buff until they put like a 0 in this number or something. Prayer of Mending getting a 20% buff. That's overall good. You're pressing that no matter what, because that's how you get your like Apoth proc, so very good. Renew Healing increased by 60%. Good. I mean, that spell wasn't really doing anything. You're just pressing the Empowered Renew to get like the CDR on your Sanctify, but they're making a lot of changes to Renew, like coming up. Lightwell, you had like a free point that you could now choose to put into Lightwell, before you're putting that into like the Naru talent and you weren't really going for a capstone. So this is kind of like an easy take now. It's not like an amazing spell, but it's a decently good little buff. I mean, Divine Image, both these changes are really good because Divine Image was quite a bit of your healings, like somewhere like around like 10%, I want to say. So these changes are pretty welcome. Holy Fire damage being increased by 20%. They could use some damage buffs looking at this. And also the Divine Image buff is going to help a little bit. And then they have a bunch of kind of like renew synergy buffs coming with like the renewed faith now increases healing done to allies by renew by 10%, was 6%. Renews from empowered renew now heal for 120% more than normal renew. So they're doubling that, and then they're making it so that like these ones don't go together that well because the empowered renew is what makes your renew go on a 12-second CD, but then its CDRs your sanctify a little bit. So this gives some like these are some nice like buffs in general. I don't know if it's enough to really put them up in the meta. I mean, the problem with Holy Priest is that whenever you have a Holy Priest on the raid, it's just like all they have to do is press N and then switch to Disc Priest, and then they're just suddenly better. And that's kind of like always the pitfall that Priest kind of falls into, but definitely makes them more viable. I think Priest is still in a good spot. I think having like a cheat death is being kind of slept on right now. We're still playing a Holy Priest pretty often, though not anymore, but we were playing a Holy Priest at the beginning of the raid. This is going to help them quite a bit. I don't know if it's going to make them super good inside of Mythic Plus, but inside of Raid, these are just some nice, easy buffs. Nothing crazy, nothing that bad. For Discipline Freeze, Lenience now causes Atonement to reduce damage by 2% instead of 3%. So the 3% Lenience was like one of the things that made Disc super appealing going into this raid. So they're just nerfing it a tiny bit. It's not like a huge deal, and it's still going to be nice to have, and you're still going to desire it because it's pretty dang close to having a Devo almost. And then Atonement now causes spell damage to heal targets affected by Atonement for 32% damage on instead of the 35% that it was before. So just a 3% nerf on how much of your damage your Atonement is doing. So that means like this priest like inside of Raid is getting nerfed by like a few percentage points, and then inside of Mythic Plus, it's a bit more of a nerf because in a like Atonement does double the healing inside of a 5-man environment, so it's closer to like a 5% nerf inside Mythic Plus. So that could maybe shake up the Mythic Plus meta because like before it was kind of looking like, from what I was hearing, like a debate between like this priest or Resto Druid, like Resto Druid especially if you Boomkin wasn't going to be meta. However, Boomkin is getting buffed. So it's kind of like I'm not sure which way it's going to go. Will this be Boomkin or Disc Priest? I know people are saying that like, oh, Resto Druid seems more appealing now. That Disc Priest is getting like this small nerf. But at the same time, since Boomkin is getting buffed and you don't need the Resto Druid for the Mark of the Wild, I'm still kind of in the boat that it might still be a Disc Priest meta. But only time will tell. Anyways, I think Disc Priest is still looking really good. Like they were at the top up here as far as like healing goes to begin with, and they're just gonna be like a little bit smaller. Resto Druid getting no changes. Mistweaver Monk healing is going to be the same, so they have no problem staying exactly where they are at the top of the healing meters with these changes. The last healer that has changes is going to be Restoration Shaman. So looking at Restoration Shaman, it's like in the middle of the pack. Like it's not that great, it's not that bad. And then as far as damage goes, it's also like in the middle of the pack. Um, However, these changes that they got are a little bit misleading. So Undermine 2-piece set bonus. This is actually pertaining to their 4-piece. It's not pertaining to their 2-piece, even though this is what they said. Fix the issue that caused totemic protection to apply insurance. So what could happen is you could put down your surging totem, and then Resto Shaman has this talent that allows them to move the totem. And whenever they use the talent to move the totem, it would act like you put down the totem again and reapply insurance again. It was a bug, so they decided to fix this bug, which is reasonable. And then they gave a compensation buff of 30%. However, the compensation buff isn't enough, and this actually ends up being a net 4% healing loss for Resto Shaman, which, looking at this chart, is kind of insane. So this priest, who's at the top and also does good damage, is getting a 3% like max like healing loss. Resto Druid right here, no changes, no loss. Mistweaver, no changes, no loss. But the one that's right here, this one is gonna go down 4%. That is like the funniest part of this tuning to me, is that like out of like the top 3, like only one of them is getting a nerf, and the Restoration Shaman nerf alone is bigger than the other three's nerfs combined, as far as like healing goes, not damage. but I think that is absolutely hilarious. I'm suspecting or expecting that either the devs don't realize that this isn't enough to compensate, or the theory crafter's math is wrong somewhere along the line. This cannot be intended by Blizzard. This is also a much larger nerf inside of a Mythic Plus environment than it is inside of a raid environment, which is also interesting because Restoration Shaman wasn't looking that hot inside of Mythic Plus either way. No matter what, I think that we are going to get some extra tuning changes on Monday, especially pertaining to this Resto Shaman thing. I'm hoping that the devs respond in kind to the fact that Restoration Shaman probably doesn't deserve a nerf with where it's at. The rest of the changes don't seem that crazy. I was expecting more Mistweaver nerfs. I think hitting their damage is the correct thing for them to do. Either they might need to hit it like a tiny bit more, or maybe they also need to give them like a little bit of a healing nerf or something, just because they are so dominant right now. Disc, I think it's probably fine with what they're doing. I would like some more pres buffs. The Holy Paladin buffs are pretty lackluster. Like that class just needs it needs another rework. I feel like this class has gone through so many reworks recently, but like this is just, you can just tell this is just like something that is like, okay, we just got to do something for this class right now, and then we got to come back and figure it out later because they don't know what to do. But the rest of them don't seem that unreasonable. It seems like they're taking a pretty conservative approach with like the kind of like number tuning they're doing, which makes sense when it's so early in the cycle of the tier of prog, and like having to like switch characters and gear up new characters kind of sucks. Anyways, comment down below what you think of the tuning changes, and have a good one. Bye.